Welcome to Life Today Live. Happy Veterans Day for those of you in the United States. And I wanted to open today by saying thank you to our veterans. And that video was put together by Angelus Temple in Los Angeles. So I want to give them credit for that. But today is a special day here in the United States because it is Veterans Day. And I just wanted to open with that and say thank you. Today I have a guest with me who is a veteran of the Navy and actually currently active in the International Guard, I believe, if I get that right. And I want to set today's conversation up by showing you a couple things, because all summer there have been protests after the George Floyd incident, murder, however you want to characterize that tragic situation, regardless how you look at it. There were protests all over the country, including, and actually here in Fort Worth, my hometown, there was a really beautiful protest, and it ended with the police officers kneeling with the protest leaders in prayer, and I think that's fabulous, and I think that that's what we want to see in our country. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case from city to city and throughout the summer. There have been protests for various reasons. I am a fan of what's called live streaming, and most people aren't familiar with this. If you watch it, it looks like this. This is a freeze frame from one, and I can kind of roll it a little bit so you get an idea. What you're looking at there are 9 cameras. These are people in the streets from 9 different cities. Now this is recorded, so this is not live, but I've been running live for over 160 days. Now it's calmed down after the election here recently because Trump was not clearly reelected. That is still ongoing. But what you see on those live, let me tell you what I've seen on those live streams. I've seen peaceful protests, yes. I watched Kyle Rittenhouse shoot 2 people in the streets of Kenosha. I actually saw that live. I have seen some things that disturb me greatly, frankly. And again, I'm not here to condemn anyone who protested for a cause they believe in peacefully. I support that 100%, and my guest does as well. But I have seen, in the name of racism, I have seen white people screaming in the faces of black police officers, telling them that they're the problem, that they're race traitors. I have heard profanity. The reason I didn't have any audio on that, the live streaming, is because the profanity is off the charts. You'll see things like ACAB, spray painted. That stands for all cops are, and I don't want to offend my audience, you can figure out what the B stands for. You'll see 1312, which is a numerical form of ACAB. You'll see police called pigs. You'll see people wearing pig masks. You'll hear chants that would make your hair curl because they are so profane and vulgar and vile and mean and awful. So in the midst of all this, I have wondered night after night after night, how do these police officers and National Guardsmen and other law enforcement out there, how in the world do they put up with this abuse? I would lose my cool. I would pop somebody in the face so fast that I'd be out of a job. So, because I don't know, I have today's guest. And she has a book right now called Guardians, Stories of the 2020 Civil Unrest in Washington, D.C. Her name is Julia Maki Pyrah, and she is a member of the Guard. She has been on the streets of Washington, D.C. during some, I don't know if you want to call them violent. I'd call them violent. She may not. But in some very intense situations. So, Julia, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So, just in case I misrepresent, I don't want to misrepresent you, and would never do it on purpose. So, tell us exactly what your position is that would put you on the streets during these protests.
That's the funny thing, because I'm actually in the Air National Guard, an airfield manager. So I was definitely not ever planning on being on the streets. I'm not security. I'm not anything like that. When we were activated, we were kind of the last ones activated as the DC Air National Guard. They activated the Army first as backup to all of the federal entities this past June, as you know, the fires were beginning in DC and the White House was threatened. So we were the last ones in there, and that was unlike anything I've ever done or been trained for before.
Okay, so you're actually on the streets in riot situations, but not trained for riot situations?
Well, I don't want to say that too much because there were a lot of people that were. I probably in particular wasn't. We were equipped. We were thrown into this situation really quickly. We were called up that Sunday night after everything was going down. Fires were started. The church was burning. The Secret Service was running out of. They were being threatened, and they were having a hard time keeping up with the crowds. So that's when they activated all of the Army guards, and then onto us. So we were fitted at supply with bulletproof vests and helmets and gas masks and all that, and stuff that I didn't even know how to put together my shield, or I'd never held a riot shield before or anything like that. I never got on the airfield, you know, so it was quite different.
What's going through your mind when you're thrust out there into a situation that, and DC got very violent. I don't know how violent it was with you where you were, but what was going through your mind during this time?
I didn't know what to expect, honestly, and I don't think many of us did. We were all just called up right after dinner time on a Sunday. Get up here. We had 3 hours to get up there when I say up there, up to the DC Joint Base Andrews, because I live about an hour south in Southern Maryland. But yeah, none of us knew what to expect, and we were kind of doing riot control training for dummies 101, quick little training, and then basically, okay, sent out there, and we all had our different missions. Sometimes it was protecting the monuments from vandalism, and sometimes we were at checkpoints, monitoring street traffic as it was coming through, just keeping an eye on everything. You know, we were distributed throughout the city, keeping everything at a calm place. And then there were people right what we called the hot spots, right on Lafayette Square, right in front of the White House. Yeah. So they saw a lot more crazy stuff.
Yeah, and I did too, because the people that were causing the crazy stuff have cameras and they live stream it, and I watch it. And by the way, there are some great citizen journalists out there. I can name a few. CJTV is probably my favorite, but that aside, so you mentioned the statues and the monuments. I just want people to understand from someone who was there, what I understand because of what I've seen. Were they going after, I don't know, Robert E. Lee, leader of the Confederacy, or were they going after other things?
I don't think they were really picking and choosing, to be honest. They were just taking their first target because I say that, and Abraham Lincoln Memorial was targeted. I mean, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you think about that. Any president did anything for Black Lives Matter, it would have been him back in the day. Um, but yeah, so anything was a target that night or that weekend.
Now, are you still working in that? Because I know there's still protests going on, but I'm assuming that since it's not violent, if you're the last line, that you're not having to do this every night still.
Right. No, no. Thankfully, it just ours was about 2 weeks long, um, but they have a kind of an order of activation as
Right,
necessary. So
right.
it did give us a good training, because it was new to us, to just be thrown into this situation, as there were also guards activated from all over the country coming in to help us as
Mm,
well. We
mm.
had 5,000 guard members out on the street at the peak time.
Wow, wow. Okay, this is the book. I'll show it to you again. Guardians, stories of the 2020 civil unrest in Washington D.C. And tell us about the book and some of the stories that you are relating in this book.
So my whole goal with writing the book, I wanted to depict what was actually happening in the streets, and I was kind of inspired when my friends were asking me, "Hey, I just read this in the newspaper. Is this true, or saw this online?" And I'm like, "No, that's not true at all." And I can't speak for the rest of the country. I don't know what was going on anywhere else, so I won't even pretend I did. But my whole point is I can tell you what I saw on the streets of DC, and so I broke it down to the different days. Like I said, it was about a 2 week evolution that I was activated. Um, and there was a little bit of everything. There was the good, there was the bad. We met many wonderful people that were peacefully protesting, exercising their First Amendment rights. And then there were also the ones that were just almost opportunists, if you will, that were just there to be loud, be heard. I'm not sure, but sending the wrong message, really.
I think that's the confusing thing at times because there are undoubtedly multiple agendas going on at the same time.
Right?
Um,
Yeah.
what you say people were saying things that weren't true. What are some of the myths you think that are out there regarding the what's going on in the streets?
There were just a lot of miscommunication as to, I mean, I did hear something about how the military is coming in heavily armed, and just, it almost sounded like a war zone, like we were coming in taking over the entire city. And when really we weren't armed at all. I didn't even have gas spray, pepper spray to protect myself. um, I was with the federal entities that, of course, were trained with arms and stuff, but we we weren't, and so we were just a presence to be there. So that was one of the big misconceptions that I
Mm.
heard.
Um, I was hoping y'all weren't coming in with the military to take over. I can say that. What was going to the
It might have looked like it as we came in with our Humvee convoys and stuff. I think that probably freaked a few people out, or it was kind of exciting actually. We were either met with applause or the middle finger. You never know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, what do you think? What do you think is actually going on from what you've seen in D.C.? I mean, is there more to it than just people being upset over uh, black people being hurt by police officers?
Yeah, absolutely. There were so many different emotions and different causes. I feel like it was just almost all lumped together as one, because the messages that the protesters carried, they would start off with something like very meaningful. Probably one of my most meaningful ones that I saw, a little boy on the street, a little African American boy, that carried the sign that said, "At what point do I go from being cute to dangerous?" And that just broke my heart a little bit. Um, to all the signs that Black Lives Matter, and then they almost evolved to just an angry mob, like that they turned into F Trump, and everything became about Trump and supporting him, and we were lumped in with that category. And so there were so many different messages going on out there, and so many conflicting ideas.
How should we feel as Americans about this? Because I think there are a lot of people that kind of go back and forth because of the different messages and really don't know what to think at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have to tell you there. It was very confusing for all of us, because here we're out there. We didn't have a choice. We're signed up to serve our country. So that's what we're there to do. I mean, I thought I'd be involved with helping natural disasters and stuff, as Guardsmen normally do, or working on the airfield. But so we signed up. We're serving. We're thrown into this situation. Not a lot of intel, because it was so immediate, the need to get up there. And I don't think our intelligence even knew what to expect initially, because it was such a mess of emotions and all over the place. So yeah, we're still figuring it out, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I know a lot of police officers have been hurt, and have many National Guardsmen or International Guardsmen been hurt. Do you know?
Up there, during the time that I was up there were 5 people that I had heard were taken off that first night. They had bricks thrown at them. One had a concussion. One, I think his leg was broke, and then I'm not sure what the others do. So 5 different guys were pulled out of our Army unit. That when I say the first night, I mean that Friday night, because that's really when stuff started going down, and that would have been the end of May, whatever that Friday is.
Yeah.
Right?
And what's the general attitude? Because I mean, you're not the neo-Nazi that many in the street would paint you to be. I mean, let's be honest. That's what they're saying out there, many of them. And now I'm not specifically talking about D.C., although I heard some pretty awful chants there. Certainly, you're hearing that in Portland, Seattle, some other cities. I mean, because this is going on all over the country: Los Angeles, Denver, Kenosha, Milwaukee, Chicago, Louisville, Kentucky, Atlanta. I mean, I've seen this all over the country, and most of them paint any law enforcement as just the worst, most bigoted people, regardless of what color they are. They're part of the problem. What do you see? Because I mean, I look at you, and that's obviously not the case, and I don't think that anyway. But what do you see as someone on the inside, as far
That's
as
the
your?
funny part. I mean, I'm a mom, suburban mom of 3 teenagers, and this is what I do on the side. So I'm not probably what you'd imagine going into the military. Out on the streets of DC. But I mean, I can remember having a conversation with one of the Metro Police women as we were posted together, and she and I were just having a chance to catch up, or get to know each other. And that was side note. One of the neatest things was meeting all the different people from all the different entities: the DEA, the FBI, the SORT teams. Everybody was activated in there. But anyway, we were having a conversation. Turns out she's from the county that I'm from, or that I live in right now, and had children around the same age. And we're sitting there talking on the street, just like 2 moms, but we're both in uniform. And we have this guy, this big, tall guy, towering over us, walked past, kind of looked at us and backed up a little bit, and started yelling some words that I can't even say here. At us. And it just was kind of mind blowing when you think about it, because like, where else is that acceptable to stop 2 women on the street and yell, like, really terrible things?
Sexist things.
Somehow,
Sexist
yeah,
things.
sexist, derogatory, everything about what we were doing out there. And I touched on that in the book. I wrote down the stuff that, I mean, it was cringeworthy for me to even write it, some of it, but I wanted to be real and to put it all in there, because they weren't my words, they were other people's. but just to convey so you get the true feeling of what it was. So
Oh, hey, you're being nice. I have listened to these people, and it is the you take the most sexist, racist, bigoted, hateful speech you can imagine, and that's what's happening right in the faces of so many law enforcement across the country right now. Well, again, it's abated since the election. We'll see where it goes, but it's been a year of unbelievable abuse. And so here's my big question, and I know you're very nice, and so I want you to take into account some of the men, especially that you know as well. How in the world do you not react to these awful people?
so I can answer that. I had a very good mentor when I was out there. It was an Army officer, and I'm not even sure what his background was, but I know he had been through some stuff before, um, and probably not in America, because that was a crazy part. You almost expect this kind of treatment in another country, but from your own American citizens, that's the crazy part of it all. Um, but he was the one who kind of really guided me. He's like, you have to be stoic, just be stoic, and that was his magical word, which I'm not a very good stoic person. I mean, I'm pretty awkward normally, um, but so and it came in handy, as there was another really ugly incident, probably my worst, of, because I was the only woman out on this one particular corner where all the other guys were that I was with, the DEA and the other Army guys, and I was very much targeted, sexually and in a very inappropriate words and everything like that, by one particular guy. And I was just, well, even more than reacting, I think I was just in shock, and that helped a lot, because I was like, holy cow, I've never been spoken to like this before, and it was mind blowing. And so I was just standing with my mouth open, but then kind of gaining my be stoic, trying to talk myself into it, and because you don't want to react either, because that just perpetuates the situation, makes it worse, gives them ammunition to fight back. But then one of the DA guys, he had had enough of it, and we're all just, he got in their face, and he's like, you better get the F out of here right now before I put my fist through the back of your face. And so I was like, thank you.
I don't know if you've seen Full Metal Jacket with Arlie Emery, who played the gunnery sergeant, who just yelled profanity after profanity after profanity right in the faces and insults at these guys in basic, right? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
He
Yeah. A million years ago, but yes.
yeah, okay, right. He looks like a rookie compared to these people. So it blows my mind, the abuse that you guys have taken. What is the temperature of law enforcement? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna add, and even worse than that, like taking it yourself, was hearing it happen to the guy next to you. It blew my mind. I was there with other African American, Hispanic, Latino, you name it, everybody, all different ethnicities in the military, and they were having other people yell in their face, calling them Uncle Toms, working for the white man, horrible things like that, and sitting there listening to them I just wanted to, and I did afterward. I was like, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, fine, no big deal. I'm like, how can you be fine with that? It's awful. And they're like, it's part of it. So yeah.
And frankly, I don't see how that accomplishes the purpose.
Nope,
It's like, let's stop racism, so let's yell racist things at people.
Right. I mean, your message is lost. Nobody's hearing your message at all.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's the case. What's the temperature of law enforcement right now? Because I know in some cities, a lot of police officers are either retiring, taking early retirement, rethinking their careers. I've got a good friend of mine that is a police officer in a city that hasn't been that bad, frankly. And it's not just this, it's not just the protests, it's years of demonizing law enforcement and putting their lives at risk every single day. I mean, it blows my mind how little people understand just basic traffic stops are potentially a life-threatening situation for a police officer. What are you seeing as the temperature? Are you seeing a lot of defections, retirements,
Oh, I
career
think it's
changes?
definitely feeling a defeat. I mean, I saw that when I was out there. I mean, I had a Secret Service member come up to me, and he's like, he definitely had defeat in his face, and he's like, hey, I just want to thank you guys for being out here, because I don't know what I would have done had you not come. They were that first night, they were throwing bricks at us, and they were telling each other, throw it at the tall guy, and he was a very tall guy. So they were heading right at him, and he's like, if you guys wouldn't have showed up, I don't know if we would have we would have made it that night. So I think they're very defeated right now,
Yeah.
and understandably. I mean, they're putting their lives at risk every day, probably underpaid. Just
Right.
who would want to put up with that?
Yeah, that's funny that you asked that, because I'm thinking, who would want to go out there and stand with them, like you are. So thank you for that. Just it amazes me. Where do you see this going in our country? Do you have any intuition as to where this is going?
Well, I really don't, especially after this election. I mean, everything is just on a precipice of anything could happen at this time. But I think the only way that change is going to happen in a positive way is if it becomes more organized, if they have a plan, leadership, to really work this change that needs to happen, for the voices to be heard, because we support the cause. We're behind it. Of course, nobody thought what happened was okay with George Floyd. Not at all.
Right.
I mean, you have a couple terrible people in the force that gave everybody a bad name everywhere, and that's just not the case, or how it is.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is I asked my police officer friend, what do you think about the George Floyd? And he's like, oh my gosh, that should never happen. The general feeling from what I understand, and I'll let you verify this, is exactly that. Some things should never happen at the hands of police officers, and it's so rare. It doesn't make it right, doesn't excuse it, but I think if we look at the whole instead of the small percentage, we would maybe have a little more empathy for those who are out there in the streets, and for people like you who are thrown into situations that you were thrown into. What if you could say something to the average person at home who is frightened right now of what's going on in the streets? What would you tell them? Would you give them advice to protect themselves, or should they not be frightened? Or, another friend of mine lives in Kenosha, and they marched right in front of his house. He sat there with his AR-15 with his family in the house, ready in case anything happened. And that's where I think it gets dangerous. But what do you say to people who are genuinely concerned about what's going on in the country?
I mean, I can understand how that would be a scary situation. I think number one, the first thing is stop believing everything you hear in the media, because I think we are really being baited to believe things a certain way, and that was what I saw more than anything, and that was what inspired me, like I said, to write the book, just to show what was really happening. But so don't believe everything you hear, and maybe start thinking about what we can do together to make a change. How can we do this? How can we move forward from here?
I think that's spot on, and we do it in our daily interactions before it gets to the streets. All right, here's the book. I'll show it to you again. Julia Maki Pyrah. It is available now. It's called Guardians. You can pick that up where you pick up books. I'll also show you her website at, what is it? JuliaMaki, MAKI.com. Information about the book and some other things. And Julia, thank you for your service. Honestly, the people in the streets that are screaming profanities at you have no idea how good they've got it that you guys are in the streets, and not a bunch of people who don't uh, that don't feel the self-control and the professional sense that you do, because that's when it gets ugly. So you guys are holding the line, and I just want to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And also, just to add, you can go to Tactical 16. It's my veteran-owned publishing company. I have to give a shout out to them because they really do look out for their veterans as well. So that's where you can also find the book, tactical16.com.
All right, I found that, and if it'll pop up on my screen, I will show people that. Internet's slow today. All right, well, here's the book. If that pops up before the music ends, I will show it to people. Julia, thank you so much. Thank you for pulling over to the side of the road and taking a few minutes to talk to our audience. And thank you to all the veterans out there for doing what you do. Have a great Veterans Day. We will see you again next time right here on Life Today Live.
Thank you.